In this video, we're going to be making an organic shapes woven wall hanging. So let's get started. Whenever I go to make an organic shapes type piece, I don't really have a plan going into it. I feel like I have to just sort of feel it out because for whatever reason, it just never computes in my imagination. I need to see it on the loom, and that's when I kind of figure it out. So I hope you're along for the ride. I've picked out some colors to at least narrow down the color palette. Hopefully I can stick with this because I have been known to start with a color palette and then end up changing it, but I'm hoping that this will be a good color palette. It's kind of vintage inspired. I love finding my color inspiration on Pinterest. I find that there's just so much there that it makes it pretty easy to find lots of different color palettes. And in this case, I started with this sort of chartreuse color. This is a deeper chartreuse, so it's almost like olive green meets chartreuse. But I started with this in terms of my search so that I could make sure that I was finding colors that would look good with it. And this is kind of what I've come up with. It's sort of a combination of more than one color palette, but I do find it makes it a lot easier when you can see different colors together before you go picking out your materials. So just for your reference, most of these materials are from Unfettered Co. And then the wool roving, so all these colors are from my shop, spruceandlinen.com. So I'm going to be using this for my fringe. I wanted to try something a little bit different because I don't do a ton of colored fringe. So I thought we would try that today. In terms of the actual look of this piece, I'm not really sure where this will take us. And I apologize if you hear thunder in the background because I'm currently filming this during a thunderstorm, so hopefully the power stays on. All right, let's go ahead and get the loom warped and then we'll get started with weaving. For the warp, I'm going to be using 412 linen. You can find this in my shop at spruceandlinen.com, and you can also find the loom and some of the weaving tools I'll be using today in my shop. I'm going to be warping my loom with a single warp, so that means just one string between or in the notch, and I'm going to be doing a total of 32 warp strings. If you need a tutorial for how I warp my loom and I start my woven wall hangings, check out this video here. Now that I have my warp on, I'm going to be doing a twining stitch followed by 2 rows of plain weave, and what I like to do for this process is to choose a yarn that's at least somewhat similar to the color of my fringe. In my case, because I did a single warp on my 4 ends per inch loom, I'm going to be using Lion Brand Woolly's Thick and Quick. This is a super bulky yarn, and I just find it fills, I don't know why I'm flailing this. I find that this thickness of yarn with this warp set works really well, so that's why I'm choosing that. Now, before I continue on, for the sake of my sanity and yours, I am going to take down my loom. Now, my looms do come with legs if you prefer to weave with your loom sat upright, but for filming purposes as well as for my personal shoulder problems, I like to weave flat on my table whenever I can. So that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. All right, so for my fringe, I'm going to be using a combination of 3mm recycled cotton string and 2mm. Normally I like to use a combination of 1 piece of 5mm with 2 pieces of 2mm. But since I couldn't get this color in the 5mm, what I'm gonna do instead is 2 pieces of the 3mm and 1 piece of the 2mm for each grouping. So I'll show you once I cut it all, but I'm going to be cutting my fringe at about 9.5 to 10 inches. I'm not gonna be super precise about that. And each grouping will go around 2 warp strings. So I need a total of 16 groupings. So before I cut too many of these, I'm just going to do a little test to make sure I like this combination so I don't go cutting all of them and then realize that I'm not a huge fan. So I have my 2 pieces of 3mm, 1 piece of 2mm. I'm using a raya knot to tie them around my warp strings. I love that this is kind of a retro color. And I mean, I love so many different shades of green, so I'm especially a fan of this, but I think that's gonna look really pretty. I think I probably could go a little bit shorter though. So I might cut the rest more like 9.5 inches instead of the 10. Now that I have all my fringe cut, I'm gonna go ahead and get it all onto the warp. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you some of my thoughts out loud so that hopefully something makes sense. But my initial thoughts are, I'm looking at all my materials here and I was like, oh, maybe I'll start with the blue string. But then I was like, maybe I don't want to start with the same material that is the fringe. I do like to try to have the textures and the types of yarn change throughout the piece. So that's my initial thought when I was like, oh, I'll start with the blue string. And then I was like, actually, starting with something that is already a different texture than this blue, I think would be a better idea. So I'm gonna do that. Now, do I wanna start with wool roving or do I wanna start with this cotton frizz ribbon? I don't know. I also don't know what kind of shapes I want to create on the loom. Also, my warp is a little bit uneven and we're just gonna pretend it's not. And what I mean by that is that, do I want to make the shapes big or do I want to make them little? Do I want them to be more vertical or more horizontal? And so these are the questions I have to ask myself before I actually start, or, you know, things start to get confusing. Maybe I want to try to make something that has these longer but narrower sections. I think I would like to try that today. So now I just need to decide what color to begin with. And I'm thinking, I do usually like to start with roving on a lot of these. If you see me looking that way, it's because I have this whole rack of my woven wall hangings over here. And so I'm always sort of like referencing them when I start a new piece. But what I'm noticing is that the other organic shapes pieces that I have over there, the shapes are kind of more like this, like not circular, but they are sort of as tall as they are wide in a lot of instances. So that's why I'm thinking maybe I'll switch it up and try to do something that has these longer, shorter. I'm already really loving this light blue with this green. I think it's so pretty. Let's go right there. So this is just plain weave going over 2 under 2. And then what I like to do is everywhere the roving is going over the warp strings, I pull up a little bubble. And what I can do to make that more organic shape is that I pull less of a bubble over here and more over here. So it sort of bulks it up on this end. Do I want to do another row of that, or is that going to be too big? So we don't have a ton of space on this loom. So this is going to be probably weave up fairly quickly. So now I'm going the opposite, but I'm not going to go all the way across. Let's just try that. I think that's fine. So now I need to decide what's next. I could do this brown color, this yellow. I can do pink. Maybe I don't want the 2 lighter colors right on top of each other. Maybe this would be a nice color to do next. How do I want to weave that? I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab, let's start with 2, and then I'm going to triple this up. This particular yarn I got from my sister, and so I don't know if it's still, I mean, it looks hand dyed, so it probably doesn't get made exactly like this anymore, but it's such a pretty, like deep plum color. So what I did is I have 4 strands of it all at once. And the reason for that is I want it to be bulkier than it is, so that's a really easy way to do that. So I'm gonna pick sort of a lower point. I'm gonna pick right here. Why? Because. Just because. And I'm gonna do a double sumac stitch. but I'm going to leave these long and I'll tuck those in later. All the stitches you'll see me using today in this piece, you can find in this video here. It is like the 6 stitches I use most often. So definitely check that out if you want more information on exactly what stitches I'm using. So this one is called a double sumac stitch, and it's the one I like to use when I'm doing sumac stitch with yarn. And I think this color looks really pretty next to the blue. So I'm gonna go ahead and just keep filling in this area, again going for that more long but short shape, and then we'll see what I choose to do next. So I backed up and I realized that I kind of want this area to get a little bit taller because it was feeling a bit too flat. So I'm gonna go back this direction to build up this shape so that it can have a little bit more of a shape. Okay, for some reason I'm not loving this. So I need to sit here and ask myself why. And sometimes it's a matter of just keep going and see where it ends up. But sometimes it's just like, there's just something that I'm like, I don't really like this. Now, I don't know if perhaps it's because this shape and this shape kind of feel the same. So what I'm tempted to do is actually take out the blue and then see what the purple looks like on its own. I don't know if maybe I'm actually just not loving the longer shapes. Maybe I do want them to be smaller, which is something I can totally do. We can change our minds and that is completely fine. So I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna take this out and see if I can like my other shape, this one, more when it's on its own. I don't know, maybe I'm just not a huge fan of the longer, maybe I'm just a creature of habit, which is fine. I kind of like this shape, which is, you know, a little bit shorter. So let's see what it would look like if we just ended that there. I kind of feel like that looks better, so I might just do that instead. And then maybe I want to bring in, let's just try this. See, I already like this way more. So I guess I'm kind of going back on what I set out to do, but that is okay. Sometimes you just have to try it and then realize you don't like it and then change it. And I'm okay with that. All right, so now I have the green, the purple, the blue, and I need to decide what color comes next. This yellow could be nice, but I actually don't know now if I even want the yellow in here. Now, at some point, I do want to bring back in this green as well, because I think that that's going to be what ties in the fringe with the piece. So I need to keep that in mind as well. I also have this roving that is a similar color to the fringe, so that can help tie this color in throughout the piece as well. I think I'm gonna try this pink ribbon. So I'm just gonna grab 2 arms lengths of it, and I'll be weaving this in just with an over 2 under 2 plain weave. So I started weaving this in, and it feels a little bit flat. Like I think I need something more textured right here. So that might change my plan. I think I need some loops, but do we like the idea of yellow loops? I guess we can just try it. So next I'm doing slip knot loops, and I really like these for adding some texture that really sticks out from the weaving. And then I also really like doing it with this more boucle style yarn because it provides even more texture. And I like to have these variations between the textures of the actual materials too. So here we have the recycled cotton string is a texture. The roving is its own texture because it's completely unspun. This multi-strand but spun yarn is its own texture. And then this one is a completely different one yet. And I do find that that adds a lot to a piece. Now the pink ribbon probably could have worked. At least it's a different sheen. Like, it is much shinier. It's a different texture than the other things I have going on, but it just felt like it was sitting too flat on the piece. So that's why I'm gonna try out these loops, and I can always undo them. I don't even have to cut this yarn off the ball to do this. So that's why I'm sort of like, let's just try it and see what that looks like. Okay, so now, I don't know if I love this shape. It feels very randomly angular. So, yet again, let me just go ahead and remove some of it. So basically, I'm doing what I thought I didn't want to do. I thought I wanted to go with these longer, narrower pieces, but as soon as I started this, I was like, it just doesn't look right. And this looks a little bit more right to me. It still feels a little strange, and I don't know what it is about it. Do I not like the purple? Okay, so now I'm grabbing some of the green that I used in the fringe, and I'm gonna try doing some knotting. I'm still feeling really unsure about this. I'm just gonna be completely honest that I don't know why, but it's just not feeling quite right to me, but I'm hoping that I will get clarity on how to make it look right by just continuing onward. Now, in the meantime, I'm gonna keep this attached to the ball just in case I wanna take it out. I've grabbed 2 strands of the same string that I used in the fringe, and I'm going to go ahead and do some knotting with that and see how I feel after that has been done. Okay, I feel like I don't love the purple. And I can't pinpoint why I don't like the purple, but I feel like I don't like the purple. So I'm trying to decide now, if I change it, what would I do instead? I don't know if it's just that the purple is feeling a little bit too heavy or what it is. Let's grab some other colors and see if we can figure this out. So I do have this lighter, more bluish purple. And here's what I'm wondering. I think what I'm learning is that for this type of piece, I really like a combination of warmer and cooler colors. And I feel like this color is feeling just too heavy. That's the only way I can describe it. And so I want to see if this color would maybe give it the sort of lift that I want. And maybe this would change if I didn't do this yellow knotting here. I'm not entirely sure, but I just kind of want to see what this would look like. And if that is the right choice, because we also have this blue here, so this might not be the right choice. And then these 2 options, I feel like I'm reverting into a color palette I've already done. I'm looking at it and I just love it so much. So maybe that's partially what's happening as well, but I am trying to make this one look different than that one, to like have a different feel to it. So I'm trying to intentionally make it different, but I keep looking at it being like, ooh, that's so nice though. So that's also what's challenging. So these ones are totally random. So I don't know if they'll work. I have this really bright orange, but that's gonna make this one look even more like the other piece does. And I think it might just be too bright, like it's almost in that safety orange territory. So that might not be the right choice either. Now this might be kind of a wild choice, but it might also be kind of cool. But then it might also be that kind of warmness that I'm not wanting here. But either way, I feel like I'm not liking this. So I should probably go ahead and just take this out. So all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just kind of push up these loops that I made, and I can push them back down later. And I'm just gonna take this out because I'm not loving it. Ooh, I'm debating in my head. Do you want to hear my debate in my head? The first one is, I kind of want to do this. Now, this does feel a little bit wild, but it also feels very like vintage summer camp in a way. And there's something I really love about that. This feels like the safe option, and I think it's also really beautiful. But it's also then bringing me closer and closer to what I've already done. So I think I have to at least try this option, because there is something I really love about this sort of orangey red with the chartreuse green. So maybe I'll hate it and maybe I won't. So we're just gonna try it and see what happens. I kind of like it. So I think I'm gonna keep that in. I'll end it maybe right there. And I think I like the yellow next to it as well, so that's good news. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that off. I wove and unwove for a little while to figure out where I wanted to take this. I was having such a hard time picking the colors I want. I was having a hard time with the reddish orange color at the bottom. I just felt like it wasn't quite feeling right. So I ended up taking that out and doing loops instead, because I just felt like the piece was too flat in that section. And then I just kind of kept going. I even added this off-white recycled cotton ribbon stuff in there as well, and that gave it some lift. And now here's where I'm at. I wove in this blue. I went and got my dowel, which I have stained. So the dowel is going to be a dark color. And what I don't know is if I want to keep this blue in or if I want to switch it to this brown. I don't think that there's a wrong choice here. I think that's what makes pieces like this so difficult sometimes, is that it's kind of like there's many right answers, obviously, because there's a lot of different colors that could look good in here. So I'm trying to decide if I like the blue or if it's maybe feeling a little bit too primary now, because now we have sort of this intense red, slightly more intense blue, slightly more intense yellow, which again isn't a bad thing, but I'm trying to decide if I like that. And I think that's what these pieces always challenge me to do, is to sit here and look at it and think, do I like it or do I not? Do I like it enough to keep going, or do I want to switch it up? So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I feel like I should probably just try the brown to see for sure whether or not I like it. I think the brown could be a good choice because I chose a darker dowel, but again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, and that's what makes this so hard. And yes, my workspace is now chaotic. I've gotten new colors, I've put ones away, and this is sort of a visual representation of like what is going on in my head. And I know that this is really chaotic to some people, and some people would be a little bit overwhelmed by this, and I'm not saying that I'm not, because I kind of am as well. But it's just how it goes. There's something about this process where I just really have to, for me, a piece like this is like solving a puzzle where I put something in, I'm like, that doesn't quite fit. And so I take it out and I try something else, and I keep doing that until it starts to feel right. And I do feel like I'm at the point where it's starting to feel right, but now I'm questioning this color. I think that it for sure works. It's just a matter of whether I like this more or I like this more. Now, I do think this brings it into a slightly more neutral spot, obviously, because it's a neutral color versus a a brighter blue. It's not like it's a bright, bright blue or anything, but it's certainly more brighter than this brown. And so I might go ahead and push all of this up and weave in the brown and see how I feel about it. That's the only recommendation I can give you when creating pieces like this, is just to weave it in and ask yourself how you feel about it. So let's try that. I think the brown is it, because I think what it does for me in a fun way is it brings it back to that sort of like colors that you might see in a Canadian national park, but for some reason the combination of this like really earthy green color and the little pop of red and the brown and the yellow are giving me national park vibes. If that makes any sense at all to anyone. It does to me. So then I did add some more knotting over here, and I think I'm gonna continue that on. And then I believe from here on out, I'm gonna start repeating things because I'm only gonna be weaving till about here. Let's measure that. I need to be down about 3¼ inches, so I have to end my piece right about here. So because of that, I need to start repeating the colors, or I think this is gonna feel a little bit too random. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start doing that. I'm happy with where this is going. It is so different than what I started with or what I set out to do, but I find that these more organic pieces that's pretty much what always happens. So here's where I'm questioning my choice right now. I just did the off-white here, which is also touching the brown and the green. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do that here because maybe that's gonna feel too similar to what I did down here. So maybe what I would like to do first, and maybe a better choice, is to bring back the yellow loops first. I think that might be a better choice. Ooh, but it's always tough because I'm also realizing, I definitely need to bring the blue roving back at some point. But because I just did roving here, I think the roving's got to go up here further. So do I want to do the yellow loops here? I think I do. Okay, I'm gonna do that. Okay, so now that I have those yellow loops in, I feel like the natural next thing is going to be this cotton in the blue. And then I'm hoping that up here, I'll be able to fit in some more of this blue roving. I don't think that's gonna be an issue at all. So that's where it kind of becomes a puzzle. At first, it's a puzzle to figure out the initial design, but then as you go, I feel like the puzzle becomes a little bit more clear. Now, am I gonna even repeat the brown? I actually don't know if I will. That might be the only spot of brown, but I'm not 100% on that. So I'm just gonna keep going and kind of work off of my instinct in terms of what I feel like makes sense for the next color and the next color after that. Okay, so I added some more blue roving up here, and I think I'm happy with that. It's a little bit bigger than the area over here, but I think that's the other thing I try to do is that we're creating balance, but it's not symmetry. It's not perfect balance. It's just sort of like I have some blue over here and now I want it over here. I have this blue over here, so now I'm gonna want it over here. So that brings me to the yellow. I have yellow here and yellow here. I'm gonna end this off with the green because that's just the logical color to end off with since it's where we began as well. And I think this yarn I can do my twining stitch with, so that's what I'm also thinking about. So I think what I'm gonna do is use the yellow now and do a little bit more of the yellow loops over here, kind of moving in this direction, and then I can fill in the rest of this area with the green. So you can see that I am sort of flattening out the top now. And what's nice about having the wool roving here is that this can be up like this, or I can kind of squish it down to be a little bit more straight. So that's going to help me make the piece straight across the top. Now for the size of dowel that I chose, I need to leave myself about 3¼ inches or so at the top. I should probably confirm that that's actually true. And the way that I do that, I will take my warp string, I'll create a loop, open up that loop so that you now have 2 loops, and then bring these 2 together. So that's what creates our lark's head knot. So then I can put that onto the dowel, and then I like to hold my fingers about 1/2 inch or maybe a little less below the dowel. And then I can just measure this. So I should have had this out already, but let's measure it. I'm gonna measure from the top. And yeah, I can see where my fingers are is about 3½ inches. So as long as I'm staying within 3¼ to 3½ inches, I'll have enough length there to wrap the warp strings around my dowel. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in this little area here with the yellow loops, and then I'll move on to the green string to finish off the top. Okay, so now I'm at the top of my piece here, and I've just finished this off by using plain weave with the cotton string. I'm gonna probably end up squishing it down a bit. I'm gonna keep measuring. I'll need to squish it down a little bit, but now I need to do a twining stitch. Now, for the past little while, I have been just turning around and doing the twining stitch, but I know that with cotton string, that's probably not gonna work very well. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off and then go back to this side and do my twining stitch. Now the reason for this is because I find with this cotton string, it's either going to get, depending on which end you're doing the twining stitch from, it's either gonna get super twisted or super untwisted, and I'm going to need to continue to adjust that. And I just feel like if I tried to do that by just turning around, that it might mess up the top of my piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do it this way instead, because then I feel like I have a little bit more control of the yarns. So you can see that my string actually is getting untwisted. So I'm gonna pause here and just twist it back up a little bit. I just want it to be fairly even throughout the twining stitch, so that's why I'm doing that. I find this isn't really as much of an issue with regular yarn, but with this cotton string, it does tend to happen. Okay, so now that that is woven in, I can go ahead and utilize my tape measure again and just sort of even this all out. And that looks pretty good to me there. It doesn't have to be completely perfect. I'm just trying to get it as straight as I can. This part looks a little bit wonky. Okay, so that's pretty straight there. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this over and start tucking in all the ends. But I think before I do that, I'm gonna clean up this space a little bit because it is becoming a little bit chaotic. All right, so now that I have some of the chaos cleaned up, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up my loom, take the tape off. I'm going to clean underneath it because there's going to be a lot of dust, as you can see. Maybe you can't. And then we're going to start dealing with the chaos that is the back. One thing I really like to have once I start dealing with the back of my piece is a yarn needle that looks like this. It's much shorter than the other tapestry needles I use to weave with, but it has a nice big eye so that you can get larger materials through it still. And what I'm gonna start with is the chunkier ends. So that's gonna be the wool roving. So I'm gonna start by tucking those in because I always find that they feel the most, well, they're just the biggest. So they feel the most in the way. And once I have those tucked in, everything else won't feel quite as overwhelming. So in terms of the other ends, sometimes when I have two ends that are close together like these two are, all I'm gonna do is tie a knot and then cut off the excess. I still want this to be tidy back here, but it by no means has to be that every single little thing is tucked away, in my opinion. Now, if you want to do that, all power to you, but sometimes it's just more enjoyable to do it this way. And I think it still looks nice in the back. We want the back to be tidy, but I'm not going to obsess over it either, if you know what I mean. Sometimes when I'm tucking in ends, there's no rhyme or reason. And so these ones I knotted, but these next ones I might choose to just sort of sew in. And it's just because there's not one right way to do this. You can kind of decide. So I decided to do it a little bit differently on these ones than the last ones. Not for any particular reason other than I felt like it. For these ends, since this section is plain weave, all I'm gonna do is I'm going to attempt to find some loops on the back. It's a little tricky with this frizz ribbon because you can't really see exactly what's what because of all the frizz. But there we go. I'm just sewing that into there. I can look at the front, make sure that nothing's looking weird on the front. And then if I'm happy with that, I can cut off the end. Okay, so all of my ends are tucked in, and so it looks like this now. And I might have to kind of re-floof this once I'm completely done. But the next thing I'm gonna do is flip up all of my fringe, take out this piece of cardstock, and I'm gonna start knotting the bottom warp strings. Most of the time I'll be doing just one loop at a time, but on each end I have a single one. So on each end I'll be knotting together with an overhand knot 3 of the warp strings together instead of only 2. So I did 3 there, and then the rest of the way down until this end, I'll just be doing 2 at a time. I'm grabbing another yarn needle now. I could use this one in this case, but I like this one for this part. So it's just another type of yarn needle. It's even shorter, but it still has a decently big eye. And I'm gonna use that to tuck in these warp string ends. Now on each side where I have the knot, I like to cut the knot off just because it gets a little bit in the way of putting it through the eye. But all I'm gonna do is grab a couple of the loops on the back of the base work. So this is where I did the twining stitch and the plain weave. And I'm going to thread that warp string through, pull it through like this, and then I can go ahead and trim off any excess. So I'm gonna do that same thing all the way across.
It's something that is still being...
All right, so this piece is almost done. One of the last things, well, there's a couple more things I need to do. So I need to attach the dowel to the piece, and I'm gonna do that now because I don't want this to get sort of out of straight at the top. I don't think it will because that twining stitch is holding on well. And then I'm gonna trim up the fringe wherever it needs it. So I'm gonna take my dowel, and for your reference, my dowel is about 8 1/4 inches long and it's 7/8 inches thick. It's a weird one, but I really like it. I find 1 inch is a little bit too thick, and then thinner than that feels a little too thin. That's just my preference lately. I feel like that changes over the years, but I digress. So I'm gonna grab 2 of these loops at a time, and I'm gonna open them up like this. Then I'm gonna flip them forward and then bring these 2 loops together. And then I can just slide that onto the dowel, and that's how it will hang off of the dowel. So I'll show you one more time, and then I'm just gonna do that all the way across. So grabbing 2 loops, I'm stacking them on top of each other to create one big loop, flipping that loop over to create 2 smaller loops, bring those 2 loops together, And now you have something to slip the dowel through. I'm gonna finish up this piece and then we'll have a look at it when it's done. It's all done, so let's have a look at the finished piece. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this one next.